I thank the chair, and I thank the senator from Washington State for her tremendous leadership on all of these environmental issues, which are now on the table in our country for the first time in a generation. And before I turn to the resolution the Senate is debating, I wanted to take a minute to recognize the contributions of Bill Bonneville to advancing America's science and technology policy. Last month, Bill stepped down as the head of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Washington office after 11 years. Bill's leadership of the office continued MIT's historic role of providing a vision for advancing science policy and ensuring that knowledge generated at MIT was relevant and available for policymakers in Washington, D.C. He will be missed in his leadership at the MIT Washington office, but I'm glad to know he will be staying engaged with the MIT community. I hope that he will continue to provide guidance to this body, since now more than ever we need science to inform the decisions which we are making on the Senate floor. Today, congressional Republicans are beginning the process of going one by one to overturn common sense rules that have long been imposed by the oil and gas and coal and other industries in the United States of America. The majority is trying to undo these rules by deploying a rarely used procedural tool known as the Congressional Review Act. In fact, the majority is talking about using the Congressional Review Act, or CRA, so often that it could actually get hard to keep track of which industry is benefiting from week to week to week from the Republican use of the CRA. So I brought down a helpful tool so that the viewers at home can keep track of which industries are benefiting each week from Republicans using the CRA to roll back protections for public health, for clean air, for clean water, for clean soil, for the health of the families in our country. So let's consult our wheel to see who's the big winner of the GOP giveaway this week. Up first are the mining and the coal industries. They are the first big winners of the GOP Congressional Review Act wheel of giveaways. That's right. First up for repeal by the Republican Congress are public health protections against the toxic practice of mountaintop removal coal mining. These protections were put in place by the Obama administration because a Bush-era rule was thrown out by the courts. These common sense rules to monitor and ultimately restore streams impacted by coal mining are despised by the coal industry. Those that created the problem despise any rules that would require remedying the problem as it affected public health. No surprise. Mountaintop removal mining is one of the most environmentally destructive practices on Earth. Mountains are turned into barren plateaus. Streams in the bottoms of nearby valleys are filled with debris and buried. Heavy metals destroy water quality for nearby residents and ruin ecosystems. The rule that the Republicans are attempting to repeal today protects the public health and drinking water of millions of American citizens in Appalachia and elsewhere across our country. The rule requires that lead, arsenic, selenium, and other toxic pollutants are monitored. It requires that streams that are damaged or destroyed must be restored. Now, the majority likes to say that there is a war on coal. But the only war that coal is losing is in the free market, to natural gas, to wind, to solar. These are the sources of electricity that the utilities of our country, that the citizens of our country have been moving to over the last 10 to 15 years. It's a war going on in the marketplace. Adam Smith is spinning in his grave as he listens to the Republicans trying to protect an industry from market forces. Adam Smith is actually spinning so fast in his grave that he could qualify as a new energy source for our country. That's how shocked he would be about this attempt to undermine the public health and safety in our country on behalf of an industry which is losing a battle in the marketplace. It is this free market that ultimately is causing these changes, and the coal industry is saying, please protect us from having to protect the public health and safety, clean air, clean water. Please protect us from having to protect families affected by our industries. A few years ago, we generated roughly 50% of our electricity from coal. Now it is down to 30% of all electricity in our country generating the electricity which we need in our country. 50% to 30% of all electricity in a handful of years. Coal has been replaced in the free market by natural gas, which has grown from a little over 20% of United States electricity generation a decade ago to 35% today. That's coal's big problem, natural gas. Another fossil fuel, but one that emits 1/2 of the greenhouse gas pollutants as does coal. And coal has also been replaced by clean energy, by wind especially, which has grown by 5 to 6% of our generation, and by solar, which is now 1% of our generation. In other words, if you go back to 2005, and you look at our country, natural gas was a relatively small percentage of electrical generation. So was it wind and solar. As we debate this issue here today, wind and solar are now up to 7% of all electricity generated in our country, up from 1%, just a little bit more than 10 years ago. And it's growing so fast as a preference for American industry, American utilities, American homes, that it poses a marketplace threat. So what we need to do is to now finally have the big debate out here as to what is the implications for public health and safety, and what do we have to do in order to maintain the high standards which we have created for the protection of families over the last generation. Last year, electricity generation from natural gas surpassed that from coal for the first time since 1949, when data collection began. And why? To quote the Department of Energy, the recent decline in the generation share of coal and the rise in the share of natural gas was a market-driven response to lower natural gas prices that have made natural gas generation more economically attractive. Between 2000 and 2008, coal was significantly less expensive than natural gas. However, beginning in 2009, large amounts of natural gas produced from shale formations changed the balance. While the cost of coal has risen by 10% since 2008, the cost of natural gas has fallen by more than 60%. For a power producer considering new generation capacity, the lifetime cost of electricity from a new coal-fired power plant is 67% higher than from a new natural gas power plant, and 17% from a newly constructed wind farm, according to the National Academy of Sciences. The reason no one is building coal-fired power plants is very clear. It is the free market. Coal cannot compete in the free market. In 2016, we added more than 14,000 new megawatts of solar. We're going to add 7,000 to 8,000 new megawatts of wind. We're going to add nearly 9,000 new megawatts of natural gas, and we added virtually no new megawatts of coal-fired generation in our country. And we're projected to add no new coal generation this year as well. It will be more natural gas, more wind, more solar. The marketplace is rejecting coal as a source of electricity. The marketplace is doing that. This isn't a conspiracy, it is competition in the free market. Unless my colleagues think that this is just happening in the United States, it is not. More than half of all electrical generating capacity added in the world last year was renewable. Let me say that again. More than half of all new electrical generating capacity added in the world last year was from renewable energy, wind and solar, across the planet. China recently announced that it intends to invest $360 billion on renewable energy by 2020. They intend to create 13 million Chinese jobs in renewable energy in that time. This isn't a conspiracy. It is competition. And the competition for those clean energy jobs is global. When we started carrying iPhones, it wasn't a war on black rotary dial phones. It was a technological revolution. When we started using Macs and PCs, it wasn't a war on typewriters. It was a technological revolution. The horseless carriage wasn't a war on horses. It was a technological revolution that moved us to automobiles. And the move away from coal and oil towards clean energy and natural gas isn't a war, it is a revolution, an American-made free market revolution. We now have more than 400,000 Americans employed in the wind and solar industry. By 2020, there are projected to be 600,000 Americans working in these clean energy industries. It is not a war, it is a revolution. Now, next, there is going to be another industry to win in the CRA, Congressional Review Act giveaway game. That's right, the next winner will be the oil and gas industries. Republicans intend to move to overturn a bipartisan requirement under the Dodd-Frank bill that publicly traded oil, gas, and mining companies disclose to their investors when they make payments to foreign countries. But that requirement is vigorously opposed by ExxonMobil, the American Petroleum Institute, and the oil and gas industry. Section 1504 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act was a bipartisan provision authored by Senators Cardin and Lugar. It requires oil, gas, and mining companies to disclose payments to foreign governments, and that is now in jeopardy. The Dodd-Frank disclosure rule goes to the core of the Securities and Exchange Commission's mission of investor protection. Secret payments can easily be expropriated by corrupt governments. They can also be a signal that a company is involved in risky business overseas, risks that investors need to know about when making investments. And by eliminating this disclosure requirement using the Congressional Review Act, we are potentially allowing for oil companies to make secret, undisclosed payments to foreign governments. Those could include payments intended to gain advantage over other companies or even bribes to foreign officials. Eliminating this disclosure requirement could allow the oil companies to make secret payments to foreign nations that could have serious implications for these nations and for investors. I urge my fellow senators to reject these resolutions and keep in place the common sense protections for public health, clean water, and financial disclosure. And earlier today, the Republicans on the Environment and Public Works Committee reported out the nomination of Oklahoma Attorney General Pruitt. Democrats on the committee have grave concerns about his ability to uphold the EPA's mission to, quote, protect human health and the environment. So what we're talking about here is the totality of a picture. The use of the CRA to one by one go after these environmental protections that have been put in place to increase the health of Americans, to reduce their exposure to arsenic, to lead, to other dangerous chemicals. This first one that we are debating goes right to the heart of that issue. And what the coal industry is doing is using the justification of their need to be competitive with the natural gas and wind and solar industries, a battle they're losing in the financial marketplace, as a justification for undermining the public health of our country so they can be more competitive. In other words, the price to be paid to make the coal industry more competitive with other industries to whom they're losing market share and the electrical generating market is that the public health has to be compromised. We have to turn a blind eye to the impact on the children, the families in our country of being exposed to these dangerous chemicals. That's the price we have to pay as a nation. It is unacceptably high. So Adam Smith looks on, and Adam Smith judges us here today. This marketplace defeat of coal by natural gas, wind, and solar is one that is being used to hurt children, hurt families in our country. I do not think that it is an acceptable position for our nation to take. And I urge a rejection of that motion, and I yield back to the leader of this effort out on the Senate floor, the great senator from Washington,